Welcome to the Create on Purpose podcast. Have you ever been so overwhelmed that you stopped noticing the good things happening around you? Not because they disappeared, but because you were carrying so much that your mind could not see anything else. I think every single one of us has been there. Life has a way of doing that. When life gets hard, our brains become incredibly good at finding more evidence that life is hard. It's not because we're negative people. It's because we're human. And our brains are wired to protect us. They scan for danger. They notice what might hurt us. They prepare us for what could go wrong. That instinct has helped humanity survive for thousands of years. But sometimes it also causes us to overlook everything that's still beautiful. When we're carrying grief, financial stress, health concerns, or disappointment, our attention naturally narrows. And sometimes we become so focused on surviving that we stop expecting good things to happen at all. We stop looking up, not because there isn't anything beautiful left to see, but because survival has quietly become our full-time job. Maybe you've been sending out resume after resume and hearing nothing back. Maybe you're watching the prices at the grocery store climb when your paycheck stays the same. Maybe someone you love is sick. Maybe you're caring for your aging parents while still trying to raise your own children. Or maybe you've experienced the end of a relationship that you thought would last forever. But maybe you've just spent so much time holding everyone else together that you've forgotten what it feels like to be held yourself. None of those things make you weak. They make you human. We begin to believe hardship is the whole story, but maybe it isn't. Maybe we've simply stopped noticing the rest. Lately I've been reminded that there's still room for beautiful things. And I'll be honest, there have been a lot of days lately when it felt easier to notice everything that's broken than everything that's still going right. Recently I've been selling clothes that I hardly wear anymore just to pay for a copay on a medication that I need every month. Years ago, that expense would have meant choosing between my health and keeping the lights on. And today it still isn't easy. But I caught myself realizing something. Gratitude doesn't always arrive because life suddenly becomes perfect. Sometimes gratitude is simply recognizing that we've survived long enough to stand in a different place than we once did. And I know I'm not the only one who's looked at a bank account before filling a prescription, or stood at the grocery store putting something back because it wasn't in the budget, or wondered how something so ordinary became so difficult. If that is where you find yourself today, I want you to know I see you. I stepped outside one morning after leaving the gym, and the clouds had parted just enough for the sunlight to spill across the mountains. It lasted just a few seconds, but it stopped me in my tracks. The light hadn't disappeared. It was just simply waiting for an opening. And maybe hope works the same way. Maybe it isn't absent during our hardest seasons. Maybe we've simply just become so focused on the clouds that we forget that the sun is still behind them. And then I started noticing birds. One had built a nest in the wreath on my mom's front porch. Another had built one beneath my porch awning. And I'll be honest, that one under my awning, it needs to come down. The walls are falling. I was just in shock when I saw that it had new tenants, tiny baby birds, a family that simply needed somewhere safe to begin. And suddenly the thing that just looked like it needed to come down had become a sanctuary. And that image hasn't left me. Because how often do we do that in our own lives? How often do we look at something that's imperfect or inconvenient or unexpected without realizing it may be creating a shelter for something beautiful? Maybe the difficult season you're in right now isn't only taking something from you. Maybe it's also growing something inside of you. Compassion, resilience, wisdom, patience. Some of the strongest people I have ever met did not become strong because life was easy. They became strong because they kept choosing love when life was hard. One of the most well-known stories in history begins the very same way, right? Not in a palace, not in perfect circumstances, but in a borrowed shelter, a manger. Life didn't wait until everything looked ideal. New life simply arrived where there was room. And maybe that's how hope works too. Hope doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It simply looks for enough room to take root. Many of us spend our lives waiting for everything to be perfect before allowing ourselves to feel hopeful. When the bills are paid, when we're healthier, when we're finally healed, when life becomes easier. But maybe hope doesn't arrive after the difficult season. Maybe it quietly exists alongside it. The beautiful thing is, our brains can learn to notice that. The more intentionally we practice looking for moments of beauty, the easier they become to recognize. We're not pretending that life is perfect. We're reminding ourselves that hardship isn't the only truth. A sunrise does not erase grief. It doesn't. Baby birds don't solve our problems. A flower growing through a crack in the sidewalk doesn't make life bare. But every one of those moments reminds us of something important. Life is still happening. Beauty is still growing. Hope is still finding places to land, even here, even now. Many of us have survived seasons that we never thought we would make it through, and yet here we are, still loving, still creating, and still finding reasons to move forward, still capable of noticing beauty. Maybe that's one of the greatest acts of courage we have left. Not pretending that life is easy, not denying our pain, but refusing to let the pain become the only thing that we see anymore. Hard seasons have a way of convincing us that beauty has left, but beauty rarely leaves. We simply stop looking long enough to see it. So today, look around. Notice the light. Notice the mountains. Notice the birds. Notice a child's laugh. Notice your dog's excitement when you walk through the door. Notice a conversation that makes you smile. Notice a stranger who holds the door. Notice the flower that grows in the crack in the sidewalk. And notice the small moments that you've just been walking past. Because sometimes the world isn't asking us to find something extraordinary. It's simply asking us to notice what has been there all along. There is still room for beautiful things. So before today is over, I want to invite you to do one simple thing. Notice one beautiful moment, just one. Take a picture, write it down, or simply come back and put it in the comments and share it with us. Because something remarkable happens when one person points towards beauty. The rest of us begin seeing it too. And then I want to challenge you tomorrow and the next day to find the most beautiful part of your day. This is going to start retraining your brain into finding good in your world again. And if someone came into your mind while listening today, someone carrying grief, financial stress, or simply the weight of trying to hold everything together, would you send this episode to them? Sometimes hope doesn't arrive as a solution. Sometimes it arrives as a reminder that we don't have to carry our burdens alone. So wherever you are in the world today, thank you for being a part of mine. Now go leave someone else's world a little better than you found it. Create on purpose.